This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. Inside the walls of royal palaces, some secrets are whispered, others are locked away forever. This is the haunting story of a king who hid his own daughter's face behind an iron mask. Why would a father do such a thing? Stay with us as we uncover the truth behind this dark royal secret. There was a king who ruled with absolute authority, his word as unbending as the iron mask he would one day command to cover his own child's face. He lived centuries ago, in a time of gilded power but fragile personality, when monarchs strove to control not only kingdoms, but the secrets that lay within their own families. This king's reign was marked by triumph in diplomacy and arms, but beneath the relentless pageantry and the calculated courts lay a wound no crown could heal, the daughter whose face was forbidden to the light of the world. Imagine dawn breaking over the turrets and ramparts of an ancestral palace. A little girl awakens in a chamber echoing with stone and silence, her small hands pressed against the cold, hard bars of a narrow grated window. Sunlight stretches across her pale face. She longs for freedom, for the world beyond the courtyard walls, for the touch of grass beneath her bare feet. But she is trapped, not by chains that can be broken, but by a mask, a cruel, unyielding iron shell that hides her identity, erases her voice, silences her sorrow. Her father, the king, believed this was necessary. To him, the iron mask was both punishment and protection. She was both his daughter and a danger, a living secret that threatened to unravel everything. Whispers circulated through the court about her birth, about a scandal, a birthmark, a secret father. The king allowed no certainty, only this silence, sealed behind steel. We don't know exactly when the mask was first forged. Perhaps in some midnight smithy, where the clanging hammer fell in rhythm with the beating heart of a man tormented. We can imagine the iron heated until it glowed, shaped to fit the curve of a child's face size cut out to peer into the world, but lips sealed shut. It would have been heavy, oppressive, imprinted with rivets and whispers of dread. The girl grew. She learned to whisper into the bars, into the dark, weaving words, into delicate tapestries of longing. "I love you," she might have breathed in the hush before dawn. Her father would pass by and straighten the folds of her nightclothes, his expression inscrutable. Sometimes he would linger, his regal posture slipping as he peered at her small figure, a flicker of regret, a hint of pity, lost instantly behind the mask of duty. The court began to murmur. Courtiers, nervous and aching to read the signs on the king's face, tried to interpret how he looked at that barred window. Was that longing, regret, or indifference? The ministers who came in to speak of harvests and treaties passed by the chamber door and caught her eyes round. Wide behind the masks, apertures, and felt a clutch in their hearts, as if confronted with a mirror reflecting their own unspoken fears. She heard the murmurs. She pieced together rumors the mask was to hide her blemish, or perhaps to hide her resemblance to a rival prince, or to the late queen, whose wisdom and grace had been beloved and dangerous. She did not care for politics, only for the world beyond. She cried tears for the wind and the stars, missing the scent of flowers and the feel of rain. But she also found strength. Each morning, she rehearsed a speech in her head. "I am more than an iron cage. One day, I will speak without restraint." Her father, meanwhile, faced revolts beyond the palace gates. Taxes weighed on farmers, war threatened borders, courtiers plotted. Through it all, the iron-masked daughter remained a private obsession. In council rooms, men spoke of her only in passing, the princess or our king's hidden child, voice hushed, as if speaking her name aloud might break the spell that both protected and condemned her. The king wore his own mask, to end not only belt of duty, but the mythology of a monarch who would sacrifice even his child to maintain order, to preserve his legacy. In whispered episodes, she came to understand that fear ruled them both. He feared the revelation of something beyond his control. She feared the steal. But what she feared more was leaving him, This man who, for all his cruelty, was also her father. A man torn between love and fear, between the desire to shield his kingdom and to shield himself. And the girl realized that the mask-heavy numbing was also his armor, not only hers. Outside, politics raged. Envoys arrived with news of rebellions stirring in distant provinces, rumors of assassination plots, nobles raising armies. The court's intrigue took center stage. Yet in every argument, every treaty, her name lingered. The secret princess, they called her in the corridors. She was a ghost at the heart of power. Each time the king entered the throne room, some eyes flicked to where she might be hidden in the shadows. Every visitor thought, what if it's her behind the tapestry, her voice silenced by steel? Time passed. The girl's hair lengthened. Her voice became hoarse from silent screams. She composed songs in her mind, lullabies to soothe herself, ballads of one day stepping into sunlight unmasked. When messengers faltered, when courtiers grew bold, she whispered into the bars of her cage, "Do not give up hope." She seemed to say, "I am still here. I am still me." In a moment of crisis, the king fell gravely ill. Fever scorched his body. The court buzzed in fear that, without him, chaos would spill. And in that fevered night, he walked alone to his daughter's chamber. The mask lay on a wooden table, its iron surface cold and blank. He lifted it in trembling hands. For a long minute, he held it as though it were a maelstrom of fear and regret, and he himself was trapped inside. He thought of the laughter he once heard from her chamber before the mask, the pure, ringing voice that belonged to a child. He thought of the reasons he'd wrought this cruelty, not believing they would last for half a lifetime. He thought of the way her eyes caught the glint of torchlit, resilient, sorrowful, unbroken. He placed the mask back. He could not bear the thought of removing it, not in his fevered rationality, but in the fragile flicker of fear that the moment had come too late to undo what had been done. He survived the sickness. The court let out a collective sigh that echoed through the halls. But now, the king walked with bowed head more often. He missed dinners in the great hall, fatigued by his kingship and his secret. The courtiers noticed a softness in his voice when speaking of peace, of restoration. He spoke less of power and more of unity, and in those speeches, hidden beneath the gilded words, was the echo of love, a guilt-laced ache for the child whose face he could not let the world see. And then a new threat arrived. The crown prince, his son by a later queen, matured and impatient. He wanted heirs, glory, and he wanted the throne. He questioned the mask, demanded stories, probed for weakness. In council, the prince referred to his sister only as that prisoner. The king bristled with guilt and fury. The silence between father and son stretched, and the old wounds unhealed bled through. In the tensions that followed, the girl found her voice, or an approximation. The mask blocked sound, but she learned to speak through the iron. A soft sigh, a guttural murmur, a gust of breath that carried the weight of 60 years. In her silence, she spoke volumes. She spoke of longing, of sorrow, of the cruelty of necessity. And when the prince stormed past her cell, she leaned to the bars and exhaled. He paused, startled to feel the tremor of breath that could only mean life. In that moment, a sliver of the world found her. The court trembled. Now the mask was no longer just legend. Now she was, unmistakably, real. The prince recoiled, uncertain. The king, watching from the corridor, felt his heart collapse and mend in the same breath. That evening, he summoned no council. He walked past rows of courtiers and into the chamber. There, he stood king and father, two titles in collision. He sank to his knees and placed a hand against the bars. She reached for him, their hands separated by iron, but hearts close enough to bleed. He whispered in a voice so low, the courtiers outside heard only silence. He loved her. He had always loved her. He was sorry. The mask remained 4 days. In those days, the court cooled. The prince, confronted by his own sister's presence and his father's love for her, grew silent in his pursuit of the throne. He began to show compassion. He slipped bread through the bars. He listened when the girl coughed her words into the air. And the king, watching, allowed a crack in his iron will. He summoned his council. "I will no longer hide the truth," he said. "Bring her forward." Some days later, on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens, the king stood with his daughter by his side, still masked. But the sun kissed the cold metal, and behind it, behind all that iron and silence, was a soul unvanquished. The common people looked up in wonder. In the crowd, someone wept. There in the plazas, mothers held children, and fathers spoke in hush. This was not a triumphant return to normal, it was something deeper. The emergence of compassion, the cost of fear, the resilience of love. Years later, after the king's death, the mask was said to hang in a vault, an artifact of a cruel solution, a reminder of a father's fear, a daughter's endurance. Stories grew, of the girl who forgave, of the man who repented, of the weight of secrets that can crush a family. Poets wrote of her eyes behind the metal mask, shining with sorrow and defiance. Artists painted her silhouette against iron, and the tale traveled across oceans, through centuries, until it reached the ears of ordinary people, thousands of miles away, in an America that prizes freedom, family, and the courage to face the face of truth, even when it hurts. In textbooks it is footnoted, in museums perhaps a whispered rumor. But the true story of a king who loved his daughter so fiercely he locked her face from the world, and of a girl who survived that steel mask with her heart alive, remains an echo in stone chambers and in the tremor of a breath behind bars. It reminds us, the iron we impose can cage a body, but not always a spirit. The command of a crown can silence a daughter, but even the coldest steel cannot steal away her song. An iron mask? It hides not only a face, but countless secrets. Perhaps we've only uncovered half the truth. Who knows if the real story still lies hidden behind the veil? If you enjoyed this tale, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. This video is narrated by an AI voice, script and editing done by human.